Dear participants, now we proceed to the competition. Before that, I would like to give some instructions to the contestants. 8 minutes will be given for the presentation and 2 minutes for the discussion. After 7 minutes, there will be a warning bell and you have to conclude your presentation within 1 minute. You must switch on your video during the time of discussion. Thank you. First presentation is in history subjects and I call upon the presentation number HYUG001 Lakshmi Priya JS.
Theodore Roosevelt once said, "The more you know about the past, the better prepared you are for the future." A very warm good afternoon to one and all present here. Today, I'm going to do a presentation on the topic Symmetry between Kerala Jews and Syrian Christians of Kerala, a comparative study. India is a land known for its diversity, and Kerala is a small replica of India's huge diversity. We can find all major religions of the world living side by side here in Kerala, out of which we'll be looking at two religions that have helped shape the destiny of Kerala, along with other religions. And as you may have guessed from the title, yes, we are going to talk about the Jews and Syrian Christians of Kerala. Jews and Syrian Christians had settled in Kerala way back in the past. And while analyzing them, we can find the influence of Hinduism up to a certain extent on these religions. However, a small parallelism between Jews and Syrian Christians have often been overlooked. Before coming to the topic, I'd like to share certain information about our research. The main objectives of our study are exploration of historical background, the socio-cultural aspects and parallelism between two communities. Hypotheses of our study are there is a considerable number of Jews and Syrian Christians in Kerala, and second one is there exists a symmetry between Kerala Jews and Syrian Christians with respect to their legend, tradition and customs, historical background, songs, architecture and attires. Our methodology included interviews, referring of books, etc. Coming back to our topic, first we'll be looking at the history of Jews. The first Jewish settlers are those who we call today as the Malabari, Cochin or the Black Jews. They settled in Crangano, which they called Shingli. In 1341 floods, the coastline of Crangano was shifted, forcing the Jews to leave Shingli. By 16th century, a new set of Sephardic Jews came to Kerala. They were refugees from the Spanish and Portuguese expulsions, and they later came to be called the Paradeshi or the White Jews. By 1950s and 60s, most of the Jews returned to Israel. Today, over 4,000 Jews known as the Cochin Jews are settled in Israel. Sadly, there are less than 30 Jews in Kerala today. Looking at the synagogues in Kerala, only the Paradeshi synagogue in Mattancherry was built by the white Jews. Rest all were built by the black Jews. Coming to the history of Syrian Christians, they trace back their origin to Saint Thomas, who is said to have arrived in Kerala in the 1st AD and converted the locals to Christian faith. With the arrival of Portuguese in Kerala, the history of Saint Thomas Christians took a new turn. Due to the events like Synod of Dampere and Coonan Cross Oath, there occurred a division in the Syrian Christian community. They divided into Romo-Syrians and Syrian Jacobites. Later, they bifurcated into numerous sections. Today, around 93% of the Christians are Syrian Christians. Next, we have come to the soul of our presentation, the symmetry. Let us take a look at the similarities of these two communities. The first symmetry is that of the origin of two communities in Kerala, which is related to the biblical accounts. Jews of Kerala is said to have arrived in Kerala due to the destruction of Solomon's second temple, and it is believed that Solomon used to have trade relations with Kerala. Syrian Christians trace back their origin to Saint Thomas, who converted the locals to the Christian faith. Next is the copper plates. Both communities have received certain trading grants and privileges. Jewish copper plate or the Cochin plates of Bhaskara Devi is said to have been given to Joseph Rabban, the head of the Jewish traders in 1000 AD. Syrian copper plates or the Tarisapalli copper plate of Sthanu Ravi had been granted to Mar Sapir Eso in 849 AD. Next, while analyzing the architecture, we can find some similarities. It mainly relates to the bima, which is basically a raised platform, and the red curtains as well as the hanging lamps. Next come to the songs. When we analyze certain songs of both communities, we can find almost exact similar verses. For example, in the given songs, both convey the same meaning and even the most of the verses are similar. When we come to the next slide also, the same can be analyzed. Look at the first verse of both songs. It says, "He comes in gold decorated palanquin to witness the wedding festivities," and like that many verses are similar. Next, when we take a look at the marriage ceremonies, we can see that both communities have a custom of carrying the couples in chair. Syrian Christians nowadays carry the couple without chair. Also, both the communities wear crowns and have bride on the right side of the bridegroom during the marriage. According to the customs, both communities bury their dead facing east, that is, towards Jerusalem. Also, both communities have separate seats for men and women in the church and synagogue. Next, when we analyze their cuisine, both Jews and Syrian Christians have Pesach appams and unleavened bread for Passover. Both communities also follow kosher, like abstaining from consuming pork. Finally, while analyzing the attire, we can see that chatta, munda and punaka were worn by both communities, and the Jews in the olden days used to wear such attires. Next is a gallery of pictures. The first one is Sarah Cohen, who was the oldest Jewish woman. Sadly, she passed away last year. Then second one is a Malyankara church, the first church believed to have been established by the St. Thomas. Third one is of Jews arriving in Kerala, and the fourth one shows a Syrian marriage in which the bride stands to the right side of the bridegroom. The conclusion derived shows a unique symmetry which is visible between two communities. Another fact is that even though Jews are less in number, the Syrian Christians are of a considerable number. So, I conclude by saying that despite all differences, there do exist a unity in diversity. Thank you.
Any question from the audience?
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
I would like to ask a question. What's the basis for concluding the information that 95% of the Christians are Syrians? Can you give the source?
Excuse me. Okay, ma'am. I found it out from the Census of India. It is available on the net. It shows that 93% of Christians in Kerala are Syrian Christians.
Which site it is? May I know?
It was the Census of India site.
What is it? What is it? Once again, pardon?
Census of India.
Census of
I
India.
don't remember the site. It was written the Census of India.
Is it a Christian that you? Is it your mean Syrians or Christians?
It tells out of the Christian community, 93% are Syrian Christians.
It's
in
a wrong
Kerala.
data. You may please verify. Google information can be, you can take the Google information, but it is to be verified.
Lakshmi Priya, you presented very well. What are the other sources? You used some of the reference text that you preferred, isn't it? What are the other sources that we can use for this topic?
I have conducted interviews like with Syrian Christians, and due to this pandemic situation, I was unable to go to the Jewish settlement over there and interview them. So that's one limitation in my this thing. And I have referred to scholar, ma'am.
You visited some Jewish synagogue here in Kerala?
Miss, I have already visited a few years back, so I know that. But currently, I'm doing my third year now, so I'm doing my project. So I couldn't go there due to this pandemic situation. So I contacted many people and gathered information. And also from scholarly articles.
So it needs a detailed study for this topic. Now you are PG or UG?
UG, ma'am.
UG. Okay, you can carry out this topic to your PG courses also. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Next presentation number is HY-UG002 Saurabh S. Nair.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, I'm here to talk about the topic, the implication of US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan. It's actually a topic from the discipline international relations. So, before moving on to the topic, I think I need to give a small introduction regarding the situation of Afghanistan, or the story of Afghanistan. And the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan was between 1979 to 1989, and the Mujahideen rule in 1992. The Taliban rule was extended from 1996 to 2001. And after that, everyone is familiar with the 9/11 attack. So George W. Bush, the then American president, declared the global war of terrorism. And after that, the US deployed troops in Afghanistan. And during the presidency of Obama, the US government initiated plans for a phased troop withdrawal from Afghanistan land. And when Trump inaugurated as the president of the United States, he put forward a policy of full withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2019 or 20. Now, under the leadership of Sami Khalilzad, the diplomat of the United States, has almost concluded their talks with the stakeholders of Afghanistan, and almost they have formulated a peace deal and how to peace deal to look forward how the future of the withdrawal in Afghanistan. So here I'm going to discuss specifically related to what are the possible implications of US troop withdrawal from Afghanistan, which started in 2011 of December, and which may in the coming years take place. For that, three important questions are crucial: who or which groups comes to power in Afghanistan, and the second thing is how long that group stay in power, and the third one is who opposed the incumbent or how violent the opposition turned to be. So here, for a better understanding of the topic, we need to discuss more about the history of the Afghanistan. Because of the time constraints, I'm directly going to what are the implications of that withdrawal. So I have classified the implications into three subheadings. The first one is the implications in Afghanistan, that country itself, and second one, India as a neighboring country, as the largest democracy in the South Asia, how that the troop withdrawal from Afghanistan affects India, whether positively or negatively, and the third one related to the implications of world at large. So coming to the implications in Afghanistan, almost all the stakeholders, almost all the countries, almost all the foreign policy experts are of the opinion that Taliban will be a part of the Afghanistan's future dispensation in some shape or form. So we can say that the country may fall back to the repression of Taliban that we had seen in the 1996 to 2001. the human rights, large-scale human rights violations were there, large suppression of the women's rights were there. What to say? The country witnessed the worst situation in their history, conflict in almost every part of the country, even in the rural areas. So the rule was so pathetic in the sense that conflict, the life of the people was in utter turmoil. So if there is a withdrawal of Afghanistan troops from US troops from Afghanistan, there is a possibility that there is a higher possibility that Taliban will be coming back to power. And secondly, there will be a large-scale refugee crisis. Refugee crisis, as we had seen during the rule of Mujahideen or the Taliban, we have seen Afghanistan becoming the second nation among the world with largest refugee outflow. And at the same time, this almost all civilian in the sense that the diplomats of after that, like Afghanistan as a nation is largely dependent upon the foreign aids coming from the different countries. Almost 50% of the federal budget of Afghanistan, along with the 90% of the defense budget of Afghanistan, is contributed by various countries. So if US withdraws from that country, there will be the foreign aid will continue decrease, so that it will somehow affect that country. Afghanistan houses a large number of ethnic groups in their country, and we cannot rule out the possibility of any civil war. And as I said earlier, the Afghanistan as a nation is largely dependent on US assistance for their law and order system. The military is not that equipped, nor the police. So there will be a huge impact on the law and order system of Afghanistan. And unemployment and the radicalization of the youth. Still now, unemployment is at its peak, and it will go on. ISIS, as the recent report suggests, that ISIS is increasing their foothold in that country. So it will increase the radicalization of the youth and the terrorist threats all around the world, especially in Afghanistan also. And the country, Afghanistan, has achieved many developments after 2004 in democracy, that human rights, press freedom, women's emancipation especially. So there will be a possibility that they will be rolled back. And coming to the economic implications, their last corruption perception index, Afghanistan was ranked 173 out of 180. So there is no proper management of the economic system of the country and the development projects of the country, and there will be a high rate of unemployment, and the lack of business and investment friendly environment is there. Business companies are transferring their assets to foreign countries. So all this will affect the internal economy of the country in large way. And as per the latest report by the United States, suggests that about 1 to 3 trillion dollars mineral resources are there in Afghanistan land, which is still unexplored. So resources are there within the country, but the question is how they are utilizing these resources. And coming to the implication in India, Afghanistan is located in a strategic point where it is the gateway to the Central Asia, mineral-rich and oil-rich Central Asian countries. Even we look at the history, whoever ruled the Afghanistan has controlled the land route towards the Central Asia. And the Taliban rule in 1996 to 2000 was the years of the asymmetrical warfare in India. Quoting the examples of Kargil War and the Kandahar plane hijack. And we have a high security interest in the region, specifically because we have a few hostile neighbors, especially Pakistan there in the north, and China in the east.
Excuse
have
me?
to prevent.
Saurabh, can you conclude?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that are the implications. Chinese interests are coming up, and at last the world, the terrorism, the implications with respect to terrorism, refugee crisis are the implication with respect to world. So by concluding, I have to say that Sushma Swaraj in her speech in Shanghai Cooperation Organization said that India stands for Afghanistan-led, Afghanistan-owned, and Afghanistan-controlled peace process and India stands supporting any process that coming in Afghanistan. But India have to look forward in be a part of the 6+2+1 dialogue in establishing peace in Afghanistan, which is favorable to India and establishing a long peace in the region. So that's all. Thank you, ma'am.
Over to Danya ma'am. Any questions?
I think sorry for the technical issues in
It's
between.
okay. It's happened. It happens. It's okay.
Okay.
Any questions for Saurabh? Danya ma'am, are you there? Dr. Danya? Any questions from the audience? Sandhya miss?
Hello.
I think Danya ma'am is not responding.
I think she is left from the meeting.
Okay, so let she join, right?
Hello.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, if the session is over,
Yeah.
because the connection was lost.
It's okay, ma'am. Any questions for Saurabh?
No, whether he left from
No,
the.
no, he's here. He's here.
No,
I'm here.
I have a
You can hear
question.
me. Yeah.
Can you explain what is the current status of Afghanistan now?
Current state, the Afghanistan is now ruled by Ashraf Ghani's government. It's actually a federal government established after the Bonn Agreement in 2004. It was a agreement like made the support of the 14 different countries. So now, as of now, almost all the militant groups like Taliban are like in a dormant situation, but somehow the US has to leave that country. The Samim Khalil Assad has already concluded their peace deals in Qatar, and I think that was a positive peace deal because they have almost concluded. Yet they have to give out the details is not yet published. So we don't know what is the provisions in that peace deal. So it will largely depend upon how they are leaving that country.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Presentation number HYUG005, Sandra Maria Kuriakous.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Thank you for being here today. I'm Sandra. I'm here to talk to you about our topic, History of the Port City of Alappuzha, a study based on its town planning and urbanization. Before I get into my topic, we choose this topic wise. Alappuzha is a historically important place, and also about Alappuzha was once a port city. So we want to know that if Alappuzha port is still exists today, what are the developments happen here and how it contributed the economy of the state, and also its influences are still exist today. Then next, Alappuzha is known as Venice of the East, one of the historically important place in Kerala. Lord Curzon visited Alappuzha as fascinated by the scenic beauty of the place. He attested Alappuzha as Venice of the East. Alappuzha is a city with canals, backwaters, beaches and lagoon, and Alappuzha emerged as a port city during the period of Diwan Raja Keshadas, man who began constructing Alappuzha as a port city. If we discuss about this, we can understand that Alappuzha was not a proud port town before 250 years, but not a proud port town, and the organized and planning and implementation through elevated developments achieved a well urban settlement. And Diwan Raja Keshadas, who found Alappuzha seacoast and understand the importance of Western seacoast and mud bank. But the loss is relevant, the emergence of Cochin port, but now it's a planted down. Then, yes, analyze the history of Alappuzha port city, to understand the process of urbanization in Kerala context, analyze town planning and socio-cultural aspects, and role of Raja Keshadas constructing Alappuzha as a city, and the contemporary status of Alappuzha. Next, I would like to talk about the Alappuzha socio-religious culture. The religious institutions of Hindu, Muslim, and Christians, and it brightens the communal harmony of the land. Few examples is Kachi Memon Jamaat, Villakal Temple, and St. Andrew's Church. The other main cultural event in Alappuzha was snake boat race. The trophy of this race was donated by Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. And Alappuzha district played an important role in freedom struggle, and the campaign for the eradication of untouchability was organized, and the historic struggle of Punapura Vayalar in 1946, people against Sir C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. Alappuzha is very rich in its religious, social, and cultural factor. 19th century district saw progress in many tier and first manufacturing factory for Cormax, and a first post office, first telegram office, and a first custom office also established in this district. As we discussing, the next topic is the role of Raja Keshadas on construction of the Alappuzha as a city. He was the architect of modern Alappuzha. He was the Diwan of Travancore. His contributions was the constructing Alappuzha as a port, trade and commerce, construction of forts in north of Kottavadikal Bridge. Now it is called Jilla Kot Bridge. Construction of roads, and he was killed by his own Raja's orders. And as we discussing this topic, today we must go the contemporary status of Alappuzha. I already told that Alappuzha is now a planted town. Alappuzha was center for the trade and commerce. A good market system is here, and entire population of town depends upon the centrally located market. And Alappuzha is now a municipal area. So municipality look after each and every function of the town, and agriculture was the major occupation of these people. Rice field of Alappuzha district have major importance compared to other districts in Kerala, and but one of the challenges is regard that large areas under paddy cultivation, agriculture was not become the organized, and major issues in this sector is reduction of the rice cultivation due to the lack of agricultural labor and lack of efficient utilization of mechanization. And majority of workers entering into tertiary sector nor organized markets for selling agriculture products within the sector. Like agriculture industry, also prominent in Alappuzha, Alappuzha gained a coveted slot in the international trade map after the construction of port in 1775 by Raja Keshadas, especially in monopoly in the global coir market. So first coir factory for manufacturing for coir floor furnishing was made by James Tarrant and Mr. Henry Smale in 1850. Then international fair named Coir Kerala is conducted every year at Alappuzha. Transportation is the lifetime of the human settlement, and the transportation is very suitable to promote trade and commerce. And the network of transportation is primarily the result of development took place in Vada Canal and Commercial Canal, the main two canals in the town. Next, I entered to educational sector. Alappuzha district as a whole is considered to be educationally forward. Literacy rate of Alappuzha municipality is 93.87. Later that Alappuzha district, there is a well-developed and systematic educational system provided from the lower sector to professional education. But the defects is that the conventional education facilities in town, especially at the school level, are commensurate with the population of the town. There is no professional college or polytechnic in town. Professional colleges are situated in neighboring panchayat. The other major sector is tourism. Alappuzha is one of the very beautiful tourist site in Kerala. Alappuzha is vibrant with scenic beauty and attracts foreigners to arrive here. But one of the drawback is wastewater and the sewage from the houseboat to Vembanad Lake increases day by day. And Alappuzha city is very much contribute to progress of city by holding its natural features. Then the problems in every sector, but compared to its growth year by year, and measures suggested and taken by each department and develop the city in very field. without any drawbacks. One of I think I want to tell about that the contemporary relevance of the topic, because I already mentioned about sea waves and mud bank. Yeah. The relevance.
Okay, you can continue.
Relevance of topic. I already mentioned about sea waves and mud bank. Alapura bypass is near to Alapura beach. It will be able to anchor by large ships. Other features was the neutral wave. Power of the waves in the sea coast was slow. So if Alapura ports exit today, we can reduce the traffic in the Cochin port and also enhance the economy of the whole Kerala state, not particular in Alapura district. So I conclude my conclusion of this topic is Alapura stands apart from other regions in Kerala. Alapura stands apart from other regions in Kerala. Alapura shows uniqueness in every aspect, and Alapura acquires many developments and changes. Maritime trade of Alapura almost declined, but it lacks the excellence of port city and the demand of oil products in European markets, and it plays an important role in economy of the district. I would like to end my words. Thank you.
Okay. Any question from the audience? Okay, Sandra Maria, I have. Hello?
Hello.
Sandra Maria, as you presented well, one doubt is, can you say that the Cochin port influenced Alleppey port?
Yes.
Is there any influence, or the Cochin port has any impact in Alleppura?
Yes, miss. Because Alapura was the main Divan Rajakesha Das was the masterpiece of the Alapura port.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so the first port city is Alapura. So then his Rajakesha Das die because but the Alapura port cities lost his power, and Cochin port will emerge as a
Yes, that's okay. Whether we can see any influence of Cochin port in Alleppey?
yes, miss.
The first developed port is Cochin, isn't it?
Yes.
Whether it has any influence in Alleppey?
Present ചെയ്യുന്നില്ലേ?
Did you read anywhere?
I confused, ma'am.
Confused. Okay, okay, thank you very much.
ആണോ?
Okay, thank you, Sandra. So, Gayatri Devi S, are you there? Gayatri Devi S, HYUG 003.
Bhagya, I called Gayatri Devi. She says
Okay.
that she has some network problems, so she can't join into the meeting.
Okay, okay. Sonia PR, HYUG 004. Are you there? Okay, I think she will be having some technical difficulty. Now the history presentations are over. So now we can start the presentations of economics. So first presentation number ECPG 001 Ashwani PS. ECPG 001 Ashwani PS. Ashwani, are you here?
Yes, I am. Good afternoon, all. My name is Ashwani. I'm glad to be here with you today, and I am looking forward to talking with you about economic, social, and psychological impact of flood 2018. And the study was based on Kuttanadu Taluk, Kerala. All you heard about the flood in Kerala that was occurred in 2018. It was the worst flood in Kerala nearly a century. Before it, the Great Flood of 1909 were the destructive flood faced by the people of Kerala that took place in 1924. Since May 2018, unusually high levels of rain took over the state of Kerala. The devastation that ensued resembled that of the 1924 floods. The Indian government had declared it a level 3 calamity or calamity of a severe nature. The massive flood affected 80% villages and 54 lakh people directly in the state. The flood displaced 40 lakh people and 483 people lost their lives. About 1 million people were evacuated from many places. Study shows that more than 50% of area in Alappuzha district is identified as flood prone, and most of these are confined to the Kuttanad region. The region has the lowest altitude in India and is one of the few places in the world where farming is carried on around 1.2 to 3 meters below sea level. The impact of flood had distorted the life of people and made many damages to the environment. It is very important to rebuild the devastated Kerala. For that, we have to calculate the socio-economic cost. Since there are various studies on post-flood situations and rebuild operations, the present study focuses on the economic, social and psychological impact of flood 2018 in Kuttanad Taluk. The objective of the study was to examine the economic, social and psychological impact of flood in Kuttanad Taluk and to suggest possible solution to the problem of flooding in the area. In the study, both primary and secondary data were used. In Kuttanad Taluk, there are 14 villages. For collecting primary data, out of the 14 villages, 4 low-lying villages were selected randomly. 20 samples where each village were selected at random through lottery method. And secondary data were collected from books, journals, internet sources, etc. The study looks into economic, social and psychological impact of flood 2018 in Kuttanad Taluk. Loss of lives and property, loss of livelihoods, decreased purchasing and production power, mass migration, psychosocial effects, hindering economic growth and development are some of the socio-economic impact of flood. In the study, economic impact has been assessed in terms of annual income, annual savings and annual asset formation, problems associated with employment, losses suffered, debt or loan taken after flood, debt repayment, major sources of financial aid, etc. And the social impact has been examined in terms of social bonding, cooperation with other members, social security, gender equality. And psychological impact has been assessed in terms of anxiety, loss of confidence, lack of sense of financial security, feeling of insecurity, etc. Next, I would like to discuss the findings of study. The study shows that one of the major impact of flood is that there is a falling trend in annual income, annual asset formation and annual saving is visible in Kuttanad after flood. This is because of lots of problems arise regarding employment such as loss of job, decrease in salary or wages, short of job opportunities, etc. Flood created many damages or destructions to the household sector. In the study, loss incurred has been assessed in terms of money. It has been assessed in terms of damage to house and household goods, damage to vehicles, loss of domestic animals, loss of crops, vegetable cultivation, etc. Due to the losses and employment problems, people falls into a debt trap. They took loans from different sources such as banks, self-help groups, non-banking financial institutions, etc. As per the study, people take loan mainly from self-help groups such as Alkutam, Kudumbashrees, etc. Then the people got financial aid from multiple sources. According to the respondents, government played the first and foremost role in it. The study also gave light to psychosocial effects after flood. According to respondents, they keep a high social relations at the time and after the time of flooding. They keep a high social bonding, cooperation, etc. The huge psychosocial effects on flood victims and their families can traumatize them for long periods of time. Displacement from one's home, loss of property, loss of livelihoods, decreased levels of security in the aftermath of floods and in temporary shelters can cause stress. The stress of overcoming these losses can be overwhelming and produce lasting psychological impacts. Finally, the government of Kerala conducted timely and efficient rescue and relief operations. They provide financial and non-financial aids to the people of Kuttanad. They played crucial role in cleaning the premises and gave awareness about health and hygiene, etc. One of the objective was to suggest possible solution to the problem of flooding in Kuttanad. In Kuttanad, recurrence of flooding in Kuttanad, recurrence of flood is common during the monsoon season. So it is necessary to adopt certain measures. First of all, they should be implement appropriate measures for diverting the flood waters into the sea before they enter the region. For this, implement the recommendation of Vaidyanathan Commission. According to the recommendation of Vaidyanathan Commission, there should be construct a channel from Viyapuram to Tottapalli spillway and should be prepare an effective plan to preserve wetlands, ponds, etc. For this, appropriate action should be taken by the government towards lake encroachments, unscientific construction of roads, bridges and culverts, etc. Then let me conclude my presentation. Recurrent flooding in a region adversely affect the overall development activities in the area. The high cost of relief and recovery may adversely affect the growth and development. Lack of livelihoods combined with migration of skilled labor and inflation may have a negative impact on a region's growth. So it is necessary to adopt appropriate measures to control flood in order to have a sustained growth and development in Kuttanad region. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashwini. Ma'am, any questions for Ashwini?
Ashwini, whether the government implemented any plan as if now?
Yes, Miss, there are various policies government implements and life mission projects and such as life mission project is important policies government implemented.
Now, what is the present condition there about this life mission plan?
But Miss, I can't hear.
About the life mission plan, you said that their government introduced the life mission plan. Now, what is the current situation?
Can I speak in English, Malayalam, ma'am?
Okay, tell me.
കുറച്ചു പേർക്കൊക്കെ വീടിനുള്ള പ്രോഗ്രാം ആയിരുന്നു അത്. അപ്പോൾ ഓരോരുത്തരുടെ ഡാമേജിന്റെ അസസ് ചെയ്തിട്ട് അതിനനുസരിച്ച് ഫണ്ട് പ്രൊവൈഡ് ചെയ്യായിരുന്നു ഫോർ ദ റീകൺസ്ട്രക്ഷൻ ഓഫ് ഹൗസസ്.
Okay. This is now we know that the flood happened in 2018. Now 2 years are over. Is there any improvement in Kuttanad? The government know that this is the problem which prevail in Kuttanad, and we can introduce how many measures. And if the flood occurs the next time, what will happen in Kuttanad? You visited that place there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay.
Recurrence of flood is common in Kuttanad every monsoon season. But the government
But in 2018 it was very severe, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am. So 2019 അതിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ള കുറെ പ്രിക്കോഷണറി മെഷേഴ്സ് അവർ എടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അതുപോലെ ഒരു ഫ്ലഡ് വീണ്ടും ഉണ്ടാവുകയാണെങ്കിൽ അതിനെ എങ്ങനെ പ്രിവെന്റ് ചെയ്യാമെന്ന് ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചുകൊണ്ട് ഒരുപാട് പേർക്ക് മുൻകൂട്ടി തന്നെ ഷെൽട്ടേഴ്സ് ഒക്കെ അവരെ പ്രിപ്പയർ ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അവരെ മാറ്റി പാർപ്പിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ടും അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അവർക്ക് എന്തെങ്കിലും.
But fortunately nothing happened this year, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now we have presentation number ECPG 002, Meenukutti P.
Good afternoon, one and all who are gathered here. My topic is Women Entrepreneurs in Kerala, a case study of Changanasheri Municipality. My name, Nino, and my presentation number is ECPG 002. When we discuss about women entrepreneurs, first we have a basic idea about what is an entrepreneur. So the term entrepreneur is derived from the French word entreprendre, which means to make innovations or initiatives. This term firstly used by Irishman named Richard Candlin.
The term refers to that a person take risk and start something new. According to him, an entrepreneur is a person who buy factor services at certain price with a view to selling its product at uncertain price. So, there are two broad categories of entrepreneurs, that is male entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs. These are similar, but some of the differences are occurred. So, they are two sides of a single coin. So in this study only focuses on women entrepreneurs. So we look upon the history of the development of women entrepreneurs, which is started on 18th century and which is becoming the expert of 21st century in the fields like engineering, electronics, etc. In Kerala present a positive picture as far as development is concerned. Women entrepreneurship is a way to make women empowerment. The study intended to find out the various problems and challenges faced by women entrepreneurs in the field of business. In the study focuses on three main objectives: to analyze socio-economic conditions of women entrepreneurs and to examine various problems faced by them and to suggest some of the solutions to overcome these problems. In the study gives a simultaneous importance of both primary as well as secondary data. According to the data provided by Justdial website, there are 200 women entrepreneurs in Changanasheri, and the data collected from 50 respondents using proportionate random sampling method, which means as a proportion of total population will randomly selected, that is 25% of the total population. Women entrepreneurship has assumed a super importance for accelerating economic growth in both developed and developing countries. They also promote capital formation and create wealth in our country. So in the study gives an in-depth analysis of women entrepreneurs would give an insight about the present status of them. In the study contains some of the limitations. The questionnaire was distributed only in Changanasheri area, and inadequacy of response, limited corporations from the side of them, inadequacy of time, most of the enterprises are unregistered, and limited number of women entrepreneurs in Changanasheri area. There are various functions performed by women entrepreneurs, but the most important functions which will be given here, that is planning, organizing, decision making, risk bearing, etc. In my objectives, there are various problems faced by women entrepreneurs that is given below. That means financial problems, social problems, government support problems, marketing problems, GST problems, managerial problems, and there were a lot of problems faced by women entrepreneurs. So we look upon the financial problems. Finance is regarded as a lifeblood of any enterprise. In my study, 52% is facing the problem of collateral security and 40% facing poor financial management, and 12% is having negative attitude from bank, and on the other hand 60% says that they have no financial problem. That means they were financially independent. So we look upon the social problem. Social attitudes can be make one better off and also make worse off. So in my study there are various social problems taken to be considered. That means 16% says that they have a lack of confidence, and 12% having less in any proper contacts, and 72% having no social problem. That is a positive attitudes from the side of the society. And we'll look upon the government support problem. Government offers different schemes to boost up these women entrepreneurs, but the problem is that unawareness of these various schemes. In my study, 62% of the respondents says that poor knowledge of scheme is the main problem they face, and 24% says that government was corrupted, and otherwise 14% says that there were no government support problem. And we look upon the marketing problem. As accessibility of marketing is determined by the profitability and losses of an enterprise. In my study, 82% of the respondents says that they were facing cutthroat competition, and 14% having any proper advertisement, and on the other hand says that there were not any marketing problem. We look upon the GST problem. GST is a main problem which is faced by lot of the producers, but in my study 100% of the respondents says that they are come out of the bracket of GST regime. So some of the findings of my study are 80% of the women entrepreneurs are financially independent and 20% of them are dependent upon bank and other financial sources and less aware about the loans and other facilities provided by bank, and the survey shows that they are not aware about government support schemes. The benefit from government is only concentrated in larger area. It is maybe. The major findings is that the unavailability of proper marketing mix, and some of the suggestions will be put forward to overcome these all problems. That is, the entrepreneurs have the perfect idea about the market conditions and enhancing the contribution of younger generation and enhancing the availability of raw materials and inputs, and arrange the awareness classes about various schemes and loans through panchayat, and widening the government support and motivate the backward people through various methods. We have a list of successful entrepreneurs in the world, such as Madam C.J. Walker. She's an American entrepreneur. Kalpana Saroj is an Indian entrepreneur, and so many others. Sheila Kochausep, and also some of the other entrepreneurs which will be listed as a successful entrepreneurs. They are also inspiration of thousands of younger women or girls who wants to be like them. Thank you.
Thank you, Meenu.
Okay.
It was a nice presentation. Over to Anita ma'am. Sorry, Danya ma'am.
Okay, Menikutti, nice presentation.
Thank you.
I have a doubt, that is whether the 25% of analysis is adequate to analyze the study.
Okay, Miss.
You
Miss,
took
once
only,
more
my question is whether the 25% of people's analysis is adequate to analyze your study.
Miss, I don't understand what the question is.
ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചത് 25% സാമ്പിൾ സർവേ ആണ് നിങ്ങൾ നടത്തിയത്. അത് ഈ ഒരു വിമൻ എന്റർപ്രനർഷിപ്പ് അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യാൻ ആഡിക്വേറ്റ് ആണോ എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ ചോദിച്ചത്.
മിസ്, ഈ ചങ്ങനാശ്ശേരി ഏരിയയില് നമ്മള് ഞാൻ ലിമിറ്റേഷനെ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു എന്നു വെച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാല് ഇപ്പൊ 100 എന്റർപ്രണേഴ്സിന് നമ്മൾ എടുത്തു കഴിഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ വുമൺ എന്റർപ്രണേഴ്സ് രജിസ്റ്റർ ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല. കഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടിട്ടാണ് ഇവരുടെ ഒരു ഡേറ്റ കളക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അത് ഇവര് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു കൊറോണ ആയതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഈ ജസ്റ്റൈൽ എന്ന് പറയുന്ന വെബ്സൈറ്റിൽ ഇവർ അഡ്വർടൈസ്മെന്റ് കൊടുത്തിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ അതിൽ നിന്നും ഞാൻ ഈ ടൈലറിംഗ് നടത്തുന്നവര്, ബ്യൂട്ടി പാർലർ നടത്തുന്ന, അങ്ങനെ കുറച്ച് കാറ്റഗറീസ് ആക്കിയിട്ട് അതിന്റെ ഒരു പ്രൊപ്പോർഷൻ റാൻഡംലി എടുത്താണ് ഞാൻ സ്റ്റഡി ചെയ്തത്. അതൊരു ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടായിരുന്നു, കാരണം ഡേറ്റ അവൈലബിൾ അല്ലാത്തതുകൊണ്ട്.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
With this presentation, the competition is over, and I request the subject expert, Dr. Danya B. Nair, to give a review about the competition.
Thank you, Sandhya. First, let me thank St. Joseph's College and the History Department HOD Sandhya for this such a new program. It is a very good attempt from the part of the college authorities because of this pandemic period. So I appreciate the authorities, because the students, they are getting a chance for this new experience, and it is a new venture for the new research culture also. So the program is very beneficial, I already said. So the participants presented in a variety of topics which is very relevant. The history topic also very, very important, and can do more research work in that field. I congratulate all the participants who presented here. All presented very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danya Miss, for your valuable feedback, which is very insightful and inspiring. I would like to convey my sincere gratitude to each one of you for the invaluable support and cooperation that I have experienced throughout this program. My special thanks to Dr. Danya B. Nair for accepting our request and showing willingness to cooperate with us in the evaluation process. On behalf of the research committee and my own behalf, I extend my sincere thanks to Dr. Danya B. Nair. Thank you, Ma, for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I would like to convey my gratitude to Dr. Bhagya D, Coordinator of Research Committee, who has been tirelessly working for making this program a great success. Dr. Bhagya, I am sincerely happy for your support and guidance during these days. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation and cheerful encouragement.
Thank you, Sandhya Miss, and hearty congrats for making this program a success.
Thank you, Bhagya. We must mention our deep sense of appreciation to all the contestants in the competitions who made this session very success. Thank you, Lakshmi Priya, Saurabh, Sandra Maria, Ashwani, and Minikuti. Without you, this session will not be possible. So a big thanks to all. I take this opportunity to express my hearty gratitude to my colleagues Anika, Helen C., my students Anjali Anil, Catherine, Mary Dinsey, and Avani, technical assistant Akhil. They are sincerely involving for the smooth running of this competition. Thank you all for your support and cooperation. I am also very grateful to all the faculty members and students for their presence and support. Once again, I thank you all.